And we're back, folks, right here on the MCU Rewatch Review series, breaking down Phase 3 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe here today, which encompasses 11 movies, all of which we've already reviewed here on the series. Go back and check them out. Go back and check out every episode that we've done today, from Iron Man 1 to Infinity War, Endgame, to Spider-Man Far From Home, and everything else in between. I think that's 22 movies or something crazy like that. This is not the final episode that we'll be doing here in the series. We still have at least one more video to go, depending on what the status of Black Widow is by the time this goes up. That being an Infinity Saga ranking of all 22 movies. What I'm thinking for that video is that I'll do a video, or I'll do my own list. Chris will do his own list. We'll rank the movies respectively, and then we'll put them together for one giant list. But that's the next video. Today we're talking Phase 3 of the MCU, which encompasses everything from Captain America Civil War, Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Spider-Man Homecoming, Thor Ragnarok, Black Panther, Avengers Infinity War, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Captain Marvel, Avengers Endgame, and Spider-Man Far From Home. Jesus, I'm out of breath. Chris, welcome back to the show as always. It's the Doc, Chris Mueller. Welcome back to the show, Chris. How are you?
Thanks, man. I'm good.
And we got a lot to talk about here today. Somewhat, but not really, because I know I mentioned this before we went live here. We don't usually go long with these episodes, doing the Phase 1, Phase 2 recaps. Phase 3 is a little different, though. And you mentioned an interesting point before we got started about how, do you think they could have broken this up a little better as opposed to having 5 or 6 movies in Phase 1? I think it was 5. I'd have to go back and check, but it was like 5 or 6 movies. Phase 2 might have been even fewer. I don't remember. I'll go back and check when you're giving your answer, but this one is like twice that. We got 11 movies. Do you think Phase 3 could have been better suited had they broken up a little bit better, a little bit differently?
I mean, the phases themselves, that's just like a marketing and storytelling thing. Most people, I think, don't pay attention to which phase a movie is from. But,
for sure, yeah.
But it did seem weird that it was like 6 movies in Phase 1, 6 in Phase 2, and then they jumped to 11. But the way that they spaced things out for those last 5, it kind of makes sense because they were very close together.
Exactly, and a lot of these events are all happening simultaneously, so it makes total sense. On the surface, though, had you told me, this started in 2016, so had you told me in 2014, 2015, when they first announced Phase 3 of the MCU for us, hardcore Marvel fans that care about that type of stuff, are you thinking to yourself, some of these movies we didn't even know about. Like, when they first announced Phase 3, you go back and watch the Phase 3 announcement video. It's really funny watching it because, first of all, they don't get to Spider-Man, which they didn't even know they would have by this point, by the time they finally got to it. But they announced, I think, New Mutants and maybe something else that they adapted into a TV show. You would know more about that, Chris, but when you first hear about these movies on paper, are you thinking, holy shit, this is going to be a mess? Because there's going to be so many more movies before we finally get to Infinity War / Endgame.
I was looking forward to the characters they were bringing in, because Black Panther was one that they announced during that thing. But yeah, Inhumans was supposed to be a movie.
Inhumans, yep, that's what it was.
And then something happened along the way where they were like, this would probably work better as a TV show, which could have been the case had the show been good, but unfortunately the show was terrible. So Marvel doesn't even really acknowledge it. It's on Disney Plus. Like, you can go watch it, but it's almost as if those events, despite being marketed as part of the MCU, just aren't. Like, the show almost never referenced any of the stuff in the movies. Mm-hmm. And even the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show in this show had no connection. So there's really no reason to consider it part of the MCU, to the point where, like, they could just bring the Inhumans back at some point in the future. Who knows?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. So, and it was so forgettable that I just forgot the name before you mentioned it there. How do you go from having Inhumans be a big part of the maybe not a big part, but it was announced as part of being as the MCU. It was announced as a movie. I guess it was maybe just so many years in advance that they didn't really realize that it wouldn't really factor into their plans. I'm not sure the exact thinking there, the exact logic. But how do you go from having a movie be a part of the MCU, be a movie, to a terrible TV show that legit does not factor into anything and is ultimately forgotten? How does that happen?
I don't know. I think the Inhumans story is just so big that they probably were like, we can't pack it into a 2.5 hour movie, because it's kind of like the X-Men. There's a lot of characters, and in order to service them all properly, a TV show probably just made more sense.
Mm-hmm.
But it felt so low budget, even in comparison to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that like the sets just looked so bland. I mean, this is supposed to be like a secret city on the moon is where they live.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like just a bunch of gray building blocks that some kid put together. It doesn't look like cool. There's nothing striking about the city. And like, if you look at it in the comic books, it's like way more visually interesting. So right there, they failed.
Yeah, it sounds like they just had a good idea of what to do with it, and they just didn't follow through, or they lost interest, or whatever. That just sounds like a mess.
Yeah.
You know, thankfully it wasn't a part of the MCU. That was not a part of Phase 3. We got other stuff instead. I'm also looking at a picture right now of that original MCU Phase 3 announcement from way back when in October of 2014, so 6 years ago. They were kind of setting the stage for what was to come. And the first few movies they got right. So they had Civil War coming out. And again, this is a year and a half in advance, so that's still pretty impressive. They got a lot of this right. From Civil War in May of 2016, Doctor Strange that November, Guardians 2, which had just come out in 2014. They were already planning for a sequel in May of 2017. They got that right. And that's where things kind of started to fall off. So they didn't mention Spider-Man. They didn't have Spider-Man yet. They didn't have the rights yet, so that kind of makes sense. But that pushed back Ragnarok from mid-2017 to late 2017. Black Panther, which was already announced, from late 2017 to early 2018. They had Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2 on the right dates, right, time frame. Captain Marvel ended up coming out, let me see here. Oh, yeah, it came out after Infinity War. No, wait a second.
March of 2019.
Oh, of 2019. Okay, I'm thinking it came out in 2018. Yep. So that was supposed to come out in summer of 2018. It just got pushed back a little bit closer. And what else are they missing here? Oh, Ant-Man and the Wasp. They didn't announce, because the first one hadn't even come out yet when they announced that. So that, I guess, kind of makes sense. But looking at this on paper, when they announced, you had mentioned, Chris, all the new introductions of characters and how they tie up stories. We've already talked about Avengers by this point, but there's just so much going on. And do you ever feel at any point while watching the movies kind of progress that they're trying to cram too much in? Or do you think that they did, but they ultimately perfected it, so it didn't really even matter in the end?
No, I didn't feel like they were trying to pack too much in. I just thought that planning that far ahead is like asking for problems.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's a million famous phrases about like, man plans and God laughs or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was just risky for them to be like, this is everything we're going to do and blah, blah, blah. But, like you said, they only really moved one or two things and then added some other stuff. So, I mean, they got it pretty much right. But I think that's why they're kind of being coy about the next phase, because they sort of want to keep it a little more fluid. They don't want to be tied to anything in particular.
That's what I was going to say. So a lot of people are saying, oh, they're kind of being quiet about Phase 4 because they don't want to run into that same issue where they announce stuff that doesn't happen. Or, I mean, I guess having movies that aren't actually announced yet, such as Spider-Man or Ant-Man and the Wasp, that's kind of a good thing because it's a pleasant surprise when we get them. But announcing projects that don't ultimately come to light, like in Inhumans, doesn't look great on the company, doesn't look great on Marvel. So with that being said, though, they went ahead and announced, a dozen movies or something since last summer, and then since then they've announced a bunch more. So I guess they did kind of learn their lesson. They didn't attach a date to a lot of the movies. Like we have yet to know what's going to be happening with the X-Men and the Fantastic Four and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely, I totally agree in that announcing so far in advance with so many different movies can be troublesome at times. But we got to start at the beginning here. Again, we've already reviewed all these movies, but Captain America Civil War, probably the best possible way to kick this one off, considering that we just had Age of Ultron at the end of Phase 2 along with Ant-Man. But I don't think there's any better way to kick off Phase 3. And I know it wasn't the greatest movie. We'll talk about that in the rankings next week. But do you think that was probably the best way to kind of set the stage for what was to come in Phase 3, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, it was basically Avengers 2.5, so it was a good way for them to give all those existing characters some more story while also giving us new characters like Black Panther and Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you need that story because it turns Bucky into a hero.
Mm-hmm.
And then now we can have the Bucky and Falcon show. So, which that I wish they would have named it that instead of Captain or whatever it is. Like
Falcon and the Winter Soldier or something
the
like
Bucky
that.
and Falcon show just sounds funny to me.
Which you know it's going to be, so that would be a lot better.
Yeah.
But no, yeah,
But
totally.
yeah, Civil War was a good way to kick off. I think Phase 3 just because it was a pretty epic scale while still being kind of a small story, even though it involves all these other people. Like it's really mostly about Cap and Bucky and Iron Man, and then Zemo's plan to sort of tear them apart.
Yeah, exactly. And as you mentioned,
Everybody
too,
else is just the crossfire.
Yeah, no, exactly. And they just have so many characters in that movie, and we've already discussed this, and how they also introduce Black Panther as Spider-Man, as you mentioned earlier. And then they get their own movies in Phase 3 as well, and they progress a lot of stories. They explain where Thor is before they bring him back in Ragnarok. Hulk is nowhere to be seen until Ragnarok as well. So it really does. And they also kind of obviously establish that tension between Captain America and Iron Man, which doesn't get revisited until Infinity War much later on. But it really feels like the entire purpose, obviously, of Phase 3 is to build to those big events, that being Infinity War and that being Endgame at the end here as well. But this has got to be, in a nutshell, the best phase that they've done, if only because, and we've said this before, the string of movies, the role that they were on from Civil War up until, I would say, Infinity War. Ant-Man and the Wasp was good. I don't know if it really continued that streak, but I would say from Guardians Volume 2 in May of 2017 to early 2018 with Infinity War, that's some of the best stretch of movies they've had in the entire MCU, and they just so happen to happen back to back to back to back. Would you say this was the strongest phase? I would say up to this point, we don't really know what Phase 4 looks like yet, but the strongest phase they've done to date, Chris?
I mean, it's tough to say because if you look at Phase 1, like, the only really weak movie there is Iron Man 2.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else in Phase 1 is just so solid leading up to that first Avengers. Like, even The Incredible Hulk is okay. Like, so as far as, like, Phase 3 goes, I think it's probably a lot of people's favorite phase because it has so much to it. Mm-hmm. But it has that advantage being 11 movies instead of 6. But yeah, as far as, like, the most good movies, yeah, this has the most good ones because it has the most movies, period.
Yeah, exactly. It so kind of helps in that respect. If it was shorter, it may not have been the case, but having more movies definitely helped in that respect.
It's the most unique phase for sure, though, because you have several different types of stories. Like,
yep.
You know, other than Thor, all of Phase 1 took place on Earth pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
So this one you have some cosmic stories with Captain Marvel and Guardians and Thor Ragnarok. And then you have all the home-based stuff with Spider-Man and Black Panther and Avengers, and even Avengers is kind of spacefaring. Mm-hmm. And then you have all the magic stuff with Doctor Strange. So it's got a nice variety of different types of heroes.
Yeah, 100%, and no one movie feels exactly like another. Like, I completely agree. Even the first 3 movies alone, you mentioned Civil War, Doctor Strange, Guardians 2, all very different movies from one another. If you don't like one, you're bound to like the other. So, yeah, I totally agree. I think the variety of this phase. I mean, the other phases have that as well to a different degree, as you mentioned. But I would say the Phase 3, the third phase, does that one the best. But at any point, I think I've asked this before as well, with so many movies coming out, from 2016 to 2019, we had 11 movies, with 2016 having 2, 2017 having 3, 2018 having 3, and 2019 having 3. At any point, are you feeling fatigue from so many movies coming out at once? Or as we've discussed before, does it not even really matter? Because all these movies are good to great to amazing. We're unlike a Star Wars where we get a movie every year or a movie every other year, and they're just very hit or miss for a lot of people. We're getting 3 times that, but the movies are so good that it almost doesn't even really matter.
I personally never felt Marvel fatigue from the movies, but I will say that, and I did this to myself, I did get a little superhero fatigued because I was watching so many superhero shows at the time too.
Mm-hmm.
So like the last 2 years, I've sort of fallen off of all the shows in the Arrowverse on CW with DC. Like I kept up with Arrow,
Mm-hmm.
but I haven't seen the last season of Flash, the last season of Black Lightning or Legends of Tomorrow, and it was just because I sort of just wore myself out with all that stuff to the point where I was like, you know what, the movies are enough. So right now, like, I'm even hesitant to start watching some of the new stuff. Like, I haven't gotten into The Boys yet on Amazon, which I want to watch.
Mm-hmm. I'm so
I
happy
really
you
want to
mentioned
catch up on Black Lightning because I've heard nothing but good things about season 2.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's just like I just don't have it in me to do 24-hour-long episodes of a show again. Movie is just like 2 to 3 hours, compact, you're done.
Exactly, and the story's over. It's not like you're waiting to see what's going to happen over the course of 20 episodes or whatever. I'm so happy you mentioned The Boys, because I know before we went live here, we were discussing TV shows, and I forgot to mention that to you, that The Boys is on Amazon. I really want to watch it. I tweeted that out earlier as of this recording. I think the first season is like 6 episodes or something. It's really on the shorter side. I believe. I might be wrong. It might be 10. But
yeah,
sure
Amazon doesn't do long seasons for their shows, which I kind of like.
Yeah, it's not a big commitment, so that's a benefit for sure. And,
yeah, because even some of the Netflix shows, it feels like they did too many episodes.
Mm-hmm. Then just after a while, if you don't catch up, or you might just lose interest too. But thankfully, not the case with those shows. But as far as Phase 3 is concerned, here, is there any one movie when they announce Phase 3 and everything that's set to come out that you're most looking forward to? I guess Infinity War Part 1 or Part 2 is the obvious answer. But aside from those, and hopefully not Inhumans because that never actually ended up coming out, but other than those, I guess, is there any movie on paper when all this stuff is announced in late 2014, upon hearing the announcement, Chris, that you're most excited for among all these 11 films? Or I guess not 11, whatever it was at that time.
Civil War had me excited because I was familiar with the storyline, but I think as far as just on the level of the movie itself, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, just because I was so in love with the first movie, I really wanted to see what they did with the sequel.
I was the same way. So the first movie came out in August of 2014. This stuff was announced in October. I think they announced the sequel like legit like that weekend that the movie came out, because it was so successful and it made so much money that first opening weekend that they were like, all right, we'll just go ahead and greenlight the sequel, even though it's been barely out for a few days. I had a countdown going from when that movie came out until the second one came out, so I had a countdown on a whiteboard for like 2.5 years until that movie finally came out, and it was so worth the wait because it was such a fun movie. But all these movies are great in one way or another. And you look at just the way they tie things in and the way they all segue together. Do these movies get confusing from a timeline standpoint, though? I mean, again, there's so much variety, but we mentioned when we reviewed Guardians a while ago, that takes place right after Guardians 1. They don't really establish that. You just kind of it's kind of left up to interpretation, but we found out later that it does take place in 2014. Homecoming is right after Civil War. So it's not in 2017. And that the whole timeline of that is fucked up anyway with the whole the whole 8 years bullshit. That's just confusing.
Yeah.
Ragnarok leads right into Infinity War, and that's supposed to be in 2017. Black Panther, I think, is after Civil War too. Not really sure. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's definitely after Civil War because he's mourning his father at the beginning of the movie. He dies in Civil War.
Yes, I forgot we talked about it. Yeah, so it's right after Civil War. Ant-Man and the Wasp comes out after Infinity War, and that's happening simultaneously. Does that get confusing at any point? And I know if you pay attention, I guess you can figure it out. But the other movies, the other phases, do such a strong job of keeping it consistent. I guess with the release schedule here, they didn't really have much of a choice. But does that get confusing for you at any point?
I mean, not for me, but I could see would be confusing for somebody who doesn't pay as much attention to this stuff as I do. Like, I legitimately read entertainment news. I mean, I read a bunch of news every day. Like I just peruse through the Google News headlines and read whatever looks interesting or whatever's relevant to me. But so I have a pretty good like line of information on just what's going on with these movies, and I've watched them all so many times. But like, if you're my 65-year-old mother who does love the Marvel movies, actually,
Mm-hmm.
but like she couldn't tell you if Ant-Man happened before or after Captain Marvel, and she doesn't care.
Yeah. It's just a good movie, so it doesn't even really matter. Unless you really want to watch them, like, all together or something like that. So, yeah, no, for sure. And, again, just this, I'm just looking at it right now, the string of great movies that they have from the beginning of the phase up until, like, towards the end with Infinity War. And then you have Captain Marvel, which was fine. Endgame, which was great. Far From Home was also very good. Man, there's just so much variety here. Do you think they did such a great job of planting the seeds? Although the timeline is all over the place, everything, not just in this phase, but really overall, factors in one way or another. Even a movie as insignificant as Thor 2: The Dark World plays into Endgame ultimately. Do you think they did a great job of putting all that stuff together, leading into the culmination of not just Phase 3, but the entire MCU?
Yeah, they did a really good job just setting everything up for those Avengers movies. I mean, I have issues with some of the movies. Captain Marvel isn't as good as it could have been, and Guardians 2 does feel like it repeats a lot of the beats from the first movie, but the way that they used just the entire history of the MCU up to that point in those two Avengers movies, especially in Endgame, I thought was really good.
Yeah, they just do an excellent job. And I mean, a lot of these things, too, I think you've mentioned it before, in that it's not like they were planning a lot of this stuff from day one. They're just very good when it comes to making these movies, going back and doing their research on their own movies to make sure things tie up. It's not a case, in a lot of senses, that they're like long-term storytelling, like the whole I Am Iron Man thing. They weren't thinking back in 2008 that him saying that at the end of the first movie was going to lead to him saying it again in Endgame. Like, they probably just did a great job of going back and tying up loose ends and stuff like that, right?
Sure.
So,
Yeah, it's one of those things where like you put two people like the Russos, who are obviously just big fans of this stuff in general. You put them in charge of it, they're going to make sure that there's as many callbacks as possible without it trying to feel too fan servicey. And some people might say Endgame is a little on the fan service heavy side, but it's supposed to be.
mm-hmm.
But at least it's not like, oh, let's go visit every single movie we've ever done for a flashback. Like, they just went to some important points, and then they created new scenes for stuff. So, yeah, I thought it worked really well.
I'm looking at this right now. I completely forgot about this, but Captain America: Civil War, which I don't think we mentioned in our review of it, in the MCU Phase 3 timeline announcement, they called it Serpent Society instead of Civil War. Did they do that on purpose to kind of throw people off? Because it wasn't. I don't think it was supposed to carry the. I mean, obviously, maybe the entire time it was supposed to have that Civil War, that plot, but they didn't actually call it that until later on. Did you have any initial thoughts, or do you remember what you were thinking when they announced it as Serpent Society? It sounds like a friggin' WWE nickname for like Randy Orton, like a faction for Randy Orton or something like that.
I don't know if that was misdirection on their part or not. I know the Serpent Society is a thing from Marvel. I couldn't tell you like if it's related in any way to what they did in the movie. I'm not familiar with it very much, but it's possible it was an idea that they had, and then they were like, no, let's just do Civil War because we have all these actors and we're not going to have them forever. But who knows? Yeah, it could have been misdirection, but they didn't really do that on any other movies, so it would be weird.
Do you think they made the right call, and we've already discussed them by this point, in breaking up Avengers Infinity War into two different parts, Infinity War and Endgame? Because when that was first announced, people are thinking, why wouldn't you just do one movie? But after watching it unfold, we obviously know why now. Were you excited for that when they first announced Infinity War being two separate movies as opposed to being crammed into just one mega movie?
Yeah, because at that point I was like, and I had a feeling they were going to do this, and I was right. I just didn't know which characters they were going to do it with. But I had a feeling that they were going to kill off a lot of characters in the first movie, and then the second one movie would be all about the surviving characters trying to bring them back. So you kind of have a bunch of characters get highlighted in that first movie, and then they get wiped out, and then the second movie is about a bunch of other characters. Cap and Iron Man, obviously, and Thor, like, are important in both of them, but it was smart to kind of wipe a lot of those characters off the board, so Endgame didn't have so many moving parts to juggle until the very end battle.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, they do such a great job with both movies. We've already reviewed them, but they do such a great job of kind of splitting it up, giving a lot of screen time to different people between the two movies. Do you think with Endgame being titled the way that it was so aptly named, obviously it was the Endgame, it was the culmination of the entire MCU, not just the third phase. Do you think it should have ended with Endgame and then saving Far From Home, the Spider-Man sequel, for another time, whether it be in 2020 or for the fourth phase? Because it came out, I don't know, 2 or 3 months after Endgame. Do you think it would have been a lot better? I mean, the OCD in me wants to say, okay, Endgame should have been it. But then you have Far From Home, which is kind of like the epilogue of the MCU. Should have ended with Endgame, or do you think Far From Home being the final chapter was okay?
I think Far From Home being the final chapter was okay because it came out the same year, just a few months later, and it did sort of deal with a little bit of the fallout from Endgame. So I think it did make sense. And plus, Phase 2 ended with Ant-Man, so it's not like the Avengers has to be the end of each phase. And Far From Home, I mean, it wouldn't have made so much sense to be like, okay, we're starting Phase 4 right away, right after Phase 3. Like, having that period of time from Far From Home to Black Widow so they can give you time to, like
reset,
sort of just process Endgame, yeah.
Yeah. And they did that with all the other ones, too. Between Avengers and Iron Man 3 was about a year. Between Ant-Man and Civil War was like 10 months, I think. And now in between phases, it's like a year and a half because of COVID. It was Black Widow was supposed to be out in May. As of this recording, it's supposed to be out in November now. So that's like a year and a half in between phases, which is crazy. And if anyone was feeling Marvel fatigue before, now people are just starving for it. So it's going to be great when that movie eventually comes out. So my final question for you, now we've done this with every phase. It's going to be a lot harder now with 11 movies. But we got to rank these, Chris. I know we're doing the entire MCU next week, so this isn't exactly the same thing because other movies may rank above, some of these or below, and my thought process might change until we do that one. But I'll start with you, Chris. How would you rank these movies, looking at them right now, from weakest to best in Phase 3 of the MCU?
All right. Let's see. Unfortunately, I have to put Captain Marvel at the bottom just because it really was just kind of a paint-by-numbers superhero story, and yeah, it wasn't as special as I wanted it to be.
Compared to everything else, I would totally agree. I would put that at my bottom as well. I would probably put that just so I don't want to sound like I'm copying you just in case you're doing what I think you might be doing. I would put at the bottom 3 right here. Captain Marvel at the bottom, right above that Doctor Strange, and right above that Ant-Man and the Wasp. So that would be my bottom 3. I don't know if you were going to say that or not.
No, I would actually put Doctor Strange a little above Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Okay.
Just because it had, just the visuals in that movie alone were incredible.
True.
But yeah, after Captain Marvel, it would probably be Ant-Man and the Wasp. And this is where it gets tricky because, I like Ant-Man and the Wasp. It's just all these movies are good. So being that low on the list isn't an insult. It's just being among so much good company.
Exactly. It's like ranking the NXT TakeOver specials.
Right. And then after that, I would probably go Far From Home and then Doctor Strange.
Interesting. Okay.
Then Homecoming, Civil War, Guardians 2.
Okay.
And then I'd probably go Endgame, Thor, Ragnarok, Infinity War.
Okay, I think those top three are probably indisputable. They're interchangeable, but I think the top three have got to be those three. Now, I've heard a lot of people say that Homecoming is one of the best ones they've done. We'll get to that when we do our rankings next week, but I wouldn't put those in my top three. I'll give my top three in a second, but your top three you just said are Endgame 3, Ragnarok 2, Infinity War 1.
Yeah, I liked Infinity War better than Endgame as a whole movie. Endgame obviously had that big epic fight at the end, but I liked Infinity War better.
I think my list might be a little different. Like I said, so I would probably put Captain Marvel. That's one thing we do have in common. Captain Marvel would be at the very bottom. Sorry, Carol Danvers. And then I would put Doctor Strange and Ant-Man and the Wasp. It's tough too because you got to separate it. I guess I'm trying to think like personally whether I enjoyed it or as much or if it's as important. Doctor Strange is definitely more important, but it also has the cool visuals. If I had to choose between the two, which one I would want to rewatch first, I would probably choose Ant-Man and the Wasp. I enjoyed that more, so that's why I'll put that above Doctor Strange, although Doctor Strange is still very good. Beyond that, oh man. You said Far From Home, I think. Shit. I think I might have to do that too. Even though I really like that movie. Oh, wait, did you rank Black Panther?
Yeah, Black Panther would have been number 4.
Number 4, okay. So, I said 11, 10, 9. My 8 would probably be Far From Home. Ah, man, this is tough. You're right. This is tough. Far From Home would be at 8. Guardians 2 would be at 7. Oh, shit. Oh, man, I love Guardians. God damn it. It's so tough.
They did really have a string of good movies that are really just hard to compare.
Yeah. I was gonna say Guardians above Civil War, but I don't know if I'm gonna do that. Civil War is just more important, and it's as good of a movie. I'll probably put Guardians at 7, and I feel like I'm betraying Guardians because Guardians 1's one of my favorites. But again, we'll save that stuff for the overall ranking. Guardians 2 at 7 for me. I think I said, or maybe 8. No, 7. Because I put Far From Home at 8. Yeah, and then 6, Civil War. 5, oh man. Homecoming. Black Panther's good too. Shit. I'd probably put Black Panther at 5. Homecoming at 4. So the 3 for me are, I know what my 3 are. I would use the same 3. For the order, though, I would say Ragnarok, Infinity War, Endgame, just because Endgame was my favorite. I'm going with the Mark answer in terms of like, oh, it was the culmination, so therefore it's my favorite. That's my answer for that one, although I know it definitely differs. You said Endgame, Ragnarok, Infinity War. I think if anyone said any of those top movies as their top 3 or number 1, I wouldn't argue with that. And we'll get to that next week. In that list also, that top 3 may change because we also have to consider Phase 2 and Phase 1. So we'll get to that next week.
And even my order might change. Like, comparing all those other movies to these, it's all of a sudden you find little things that make you like one movie more than another. So, Black Panther may be above Infinity War in my overall rankings next week by judging by how I feel. I don't know. It changes so often.
Exactly. It changes like every day when I wake up. I mean, when you go from Phase 3, it's like, oh, okay, I enjoyed this from Phase 3, or like this was the most important, but overall it doesn't really matter as much. So, yeah, it's definitely tough. But with 11 movies, it's difficult to rank. So, I'm just guaranteeing mine right now is bound to change. I don't think my top 3 will change, but it'll probably be around there. I'm not going to guarantee that Captain Marvel is going to go from being at the last to being in like my top 5. I'll tell you right now that's not going to happen. It'll definitely be towards the bottom. But there's just so many other good movies, and I'm looking forward to ranking all those next week here on the show. And maybe we'll bring on someone else too to help us rank it. Because I'm thinking it's going to be difficult and it might be a longer episode, but it might also take us 5 minutes. So we'll put our list together and we'll try to forge one ultimate list of the MCU rewatch ranking. And I guess actually it's different too. I say rewatch ranking as if like oh, you should go in this order to rewatch it or this order to whatever.
Yeah,
But
right.
it's tough because that's a totally different list altogether too. Because I would say like, oh, if you're gonna rewatch all the movies, you have to watch Thor. But like that wouldn't even be anywhere near my top one, like my top 10 rather. So it's so fucking tough, and a lot of this is completely subjective. Like, oh, I enjoyed this movie more, or this is better, blah blah blah. So anyway, we'll get to that stuff next week. But any closing thoughts, Chris, on the Phase 3 of the MCU as being arguably the best to date and featuring some great movies here?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely their strongest phase in terms of like how many great movies it has. I'm still very partial to Phase 1 just because it all built towards just one amazing climax in the Avengers, and by the time you get to Phase 3 you have so many heroes in so many different places that it feels hard to service all of them when you get these big team up movies.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's really not a bad movie in the bunch. Like even Captain Marvel, which was at the bottom of both our lists, is not a bad movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not the strongest.
Yeah, I would probably, spoiler alert, put that above Dark World, but we'll come to that conclusion next week in terms of what would be the weakest or the worst of the MCU. But they're all great. They're all great for different reasons. And
speaking of Thor, Chris Hemsworth actually just said in an interview he has no plans of leaving the MCU anytime soon. So
that is positive.
Hopefully that means we get another 5 or 6 years of Thor, which which is good because he's kind of the last man standing from that original trio. I know Hulk is still around, and Hulk is technically, that movie was part of the MCU, but he's never going to get his own solo movie again.
I don't expect him to, no.
Just because the rights are all messed up with another studio, Universal or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's Universal.
So Thor Love and Thunder is obviously planned, but I have a feeling he'll be part of whatever the next Avengers movie is, and maybe even another Thor movie after that. Or maybe he'll be part of Guardians 3 as part of the team. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. And he's one of the perfect people to continue to build around, just because his character's already evolved so much, and I would love to see more movies with him. I know I'm not the only one. So it makes sense. You got to have at least one building block from the past of that original group. And you could choose Captain America or Iron Man, but their character arcs were already completed, so there's no reason to keep them around, even if they wanted to stick around, regardless of their contract situation. But yeah, so that'll be great.
I do hope they convince Downey to return in one capacity, and that's that, like, in the comics, Iron Man prepares for the eventuality of his own death by essentially uploading himself into an AI.
That's what that's what I thought you were gonna say. Yeah.
So, like, as soon as he dies, his AI starts working in his place, like being Iron Man and doing all this other stuff. And I think a lot of people didn't even know he was around for a while. And then somehow the real Tony gets resurrected through time travel or something. I don't remember, but they very easily could have Robert Downey Jr. just come in and do voiceovers like Paul Bettany used to do for Jarvis. Like, he could be the new AI that, Spider-Man's using, or just that the Avengers use at Avengers Tower in general.
Yeah, I hope so. That's been a debate over the years as to whether, or at least since Endgame, since he died, as to whether they should bring him back in a role like that. I would like to see it. I'm glad they didn't do it for Far From Home. I feel like it would just be way too soon. But I feel like if they wait long enough, maybe in a couple of years, and if they were to keep it limited, I don't want him back in like a regular role, but you also don't hear Jarvis a ton in that first Iron Man movie or the second Iron Man movie. So yeah, that could definitely work. For a big return pop at some point, I think would be sick. So yeah, hopefully.
Well, supposedly he's in Black Widow.
That's what I heard, but I don't know if that was confirmed or not. I mean, we might know more by the time this comes out, but
yeah, I don't know if it's supposed to be like file footage, like they're going to show just some footage of him from another movie, or if he filmed new scenes. But it wouldn't surprise me if he filmed a cameo for it, because it's supposed to take place before he died, so it would make sense. Like, she's working for the Avengers, but it's weird that she wouldn't call on them for help in her whatever adventure is,
Yeah, I know, it's just weird. I know it takes.
There's got to be some excuse that they come up with, like, I don't know. I'm not even 100% sure like when the movie is supposed to take place. It's clearly after Civil War, but before Infinity War, I
Yeah,
think.
that
I don't
2 year
know.
period. Yeah, I think so too.
Or
It's
does it
just
take
weird.
place in the 5 years between Infinity War and Endgame? Like, I don't know.
Well, no, it can't because she's dead. Oh no, wait, no, she's alive. She's alive. I'm
She
sorry.
dies in Endgame,
I'm
so
thinking.
she's still alive in those 5 years.
I'm thinking of Gamora. No, yeah, it takes place. I mean, I guess it could take place in that time frame, but I was led to believe that they're gonna. I thought it would be like her as like a teenager or something. Like we find out where she came from, which I'm sure we will. We know a little bit from other movies like Age of Ultron, but we don't know a whole lot. But it's not. It's actually a majority of the movie is going to be taking place from 2016 to 2018, which would be between Infinity War, or I'm sorry, Civil War and Endgame. So that would make the most sense. I guess they could always do post Infinity War stuff. I guess we'll see. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess if he's in it, cool, but like, I really wanted his last in-person cameo to be an Endgame. I just feel like it's not necessary to have him in it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, if they're going to bring him back, they should at least wait a couple years.
Yeah, not literally like 2 movies later. So
Well, and you know, it seemed like they had that kid from Iron Man 3 at the funeral in Endgame.
Yep.
Almost as a way to like indicate that maybe he'll be the one to carry on Iron Man's legacy. Like maybe Pepper starts mentoring him and gives him a suit, and then Tony's the AI in his suit in a couple years.
That could be possible because we're so far removed from that right now. We're so far away from it that by the time they do it in 2024, 2025, I wouldn't be opposed to that at all.
Yeah, and he'll be more grown by that point.
Mm-hmm.
So it would make perfect sense to use that character again, because Iron Man as a character is cool. I mean, it's going to sell a lot of merchandise.
Yep.
So they'll want another version of Iron Man. Whether they call him Iron Man or they call him something else is, you know, up to them. But I'm not sure if that Harley Keener kid that was supposed to be his name, I don't know if he's like based on something from the comics or not.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. I didn't think he was, because in the comics, as part of the Young Avengers, is it his daughter Morgan that's a part of the Young Avengers, or who fills in for him as Iron Man?
Morgan's like, he doesn't have a daughter named Morgan in the comics. Morgan is the name of his uncle in the comics.
Oh, okay.
And there's
They
a
reference
reference to that in Infinity War.
Yeah.
And he's like, and he mentions that it's Pepper's uncle, I think.
Yeah, not his, yeah.
But yeah, and then he also has a brother in the comics named Arno.
Interesting.
Who's a villain, if I'm not mistaken.
So they don't... Is there a young Iron Man then that fills in for him, or no?
Well, there's an Iron Lad who's a version of Tony from the past. So it's like teenage Tony.
Oh, okay. So it's not a different person, I guess. Yeah, I could see them. I don't know if that would work if they adapted that. So I could see it either being Morgan or... I mean, yeah, I would hope they bring back Harley Keener's character. I think.
Plus, it'd be cool because, like, him and Peter could sort of have, like, a little bit of animosity. Like, no, I was Tony's favorite.
Yeah, well, I was going to say... Wait a second. Aren't they around the same age, technically, in the storyline? Because that kid, well, he was... Wait... The one in Iron Man 2 was with the Iron Man mask. Is canon was supposed to be
Peter.
Peter, yeah. So, in an Iron Man 3, which came out a couple years later, Harley's probably around... they were probably around the same age then in storyline.
Well, especially because of the whole, like, dusting thing. We don't know if he got dusted too and what age he's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that the actors, like Tom Holland and that actor who played him, are right around the same age.
That makes sense. He probably, I would assume, didn't get dusted. I would hope that he... Oh, wait a second. I was going to say that I would hope that he didn't, just because he looks like he would be as old as he is now from Iron Man 3. But then again, what's his name? Tom Holland got dusted, and he's now 18. So that would make Harley Keener's character, like, what, 20-something? So maybe not. Yeah. Maybe he should have gotten dusted. I guess we'll see.
But I do like how they're setting up all these potential characters for the Young Avengers, because like they already established that Hawkeye's been teaching his daughter archery.
Yeah.
But then his TV show is actually supposed to be about him training another woman.
Interesting.
Named Kate Bishop.
Oh yeah, I've heard that name. I thought that was his daughter though.
No, she takes over the mantle of Hawkeye after he like retires or dies or something in the comics. So I don't know if Hawkeye had a daughter in the comics, but it's possible like his legacy could be carried on by two different characters moving forward. And then you have, even further in the future, you have Tony has a young daughter who could be used at some point in 10, 15 years.
Yeah, there's a lot of. I think they're definitely going for that eventually. There's so many options because they also have Monica, right? Was that her name? That wasn't her mom's name. That was Monica Rambeau.
Right, and she'd be an adult by this point because she was a kid in the 90s. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, she's going to be in one of the shows as an adult. Like,
as an adult. Yeah, you're right.
It might even be Falcon and Winter Soldier.
It might be. I forgot what show it was. I think it is that one. It's such a random assortment of characters because I know the friend. I always forget her name.
Agent 13.
Not Agent 13. The friend from the Thor movies. The woman.
Sif?
Not Sif.
Oh, Kat Dennings' character.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Darcy.
Yeah. Darcy. I heard she was rumored to be in the show too. It's such a random assortment of people, so I'm not.
Well,
really
she
sure.
could be working with Selvig, and if
Selvig's
Bucky and Falcon need Selvig, like that would make perfect sense why she would be there too.
I could see that. I'm interested to see what they do with it. This is going up like a month after we record it, but they might have announced more by this point. But I thought it was supposed to be out this fall. They might have bumped it because they didn't finish filming it yet due to the current circumstances, so I'm not sure. But yeah, they also have, Cassie, Scott Lang's daughter, if they wanted to use her. I'm not sure if she would.
They aged her up because of the 5-year gap, and now she's like, I don't know, 17, 18. I'm not sure how old that girl was supposed to be, but and she does become a hero in the comics named Stature, who has the same powers as her father. So yeah, they're setting up all these characters who could potentially carry on like the legacy heroes gimmick, so to speak.
Yeah.
While also introducing all these other new characters. But what I'm very curious about is the rumor that the WandaVision show will lead to the mutants being introduced, because she's like, they haven't tapped into how powerful she is yet in the movies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's so powerful in the comics that she literally alters reality just to bring Vision back to life. And I think that's what the show is going to be.
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, they kind of hinted at it a little bit when she was up against Thanos, and she probably could kill him on his own until I forgot what happened in Endgame that prevented that from happening. But remember that part?
He indicates to his guys, like, rain down fire, and all the ship stuff coming down probably distracts her. But, like, in reality, like, she's probably more powerful than Doctor Strange. She just doesn't know how to use it yet.
That's true, yeah, because she's still kind of figuring out her powers and stuff.
And then she was the one who, like, basically wiped out most, if not all of the mutants in one storyline and then brought them back.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm almost wondering if she's going to do something to alter reality, and that leads to the mutants being introduced.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. I've heard a lot of rumors about that. There's a lot of ways they can bring in the mutants or the...
Yeah, I mean, we already know Doctor Strange is going to deal with the multiverse too, so
exactly.
That could be the other way. Like, maybe in Earth 2, the mutants have been around this whole time and there are no Avengers, and then they combine the two universes somehow, which they've done in the comics a million times.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that happening. I'm interested also to see if all the pushbacks right now with the movies and, like, I don't know if the shows are being pushed back. Because my question is, because it sounds like some of these shows are going to be tying into some of the movies. Because I thought WandaVision was supposed to tie into the Doctor Strange movie, the Multiverse of Madness.
It is, because I think she's in the multiverse movie too.
That's what I heard. So I don't know, like, if they push back that movie, does it come out after the movie, or do they not push it back? And you know what I mean? Like, I wonder if that's going to get messed up at all, because they're very particular with when things come out. So
I don't know, but in the comics, she goes heel a few times, and I kind of hope that she's the bad guy in Doctor Strange.
Who, Wanda?
Yeah, like, I almost sort of hope that it's something where, like, her show deals with how she fucks up reality, and then I want the Doctor Strange movie to be about how he fixes it.
Oh, okay. That would be interesting.
And tries to, like, redeem her and bring her back to the side of good or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that would be an interesting way to do it, because that would allow them to not only tie those characters together more closely, but also mess with the universe any way they want. So if she alters reality, if they go to multiverses and combine all these different things, like, some heroes could get wiped out, some could get resurrected. Like, I don't know, but it may also be what they decide to do with Black Panther. Like, they may use that as an excuse for how he gets written off. Like, maybe he, died in the battle or something. But yeah, I don't know. I know Marvel has already said that they are moving forward with Black Panther 2, and I believe the story will focus on Shuri taking over the crown.
That's what I've heard too. And
So
yeah,
I'm sure they'll find, a good way to pay tribute to him. I don't know if they have deleted scenes in the can that they can use to, like, put him in one last scene before his character's killed off, or whatever they decide to do with it.
yeah. I don't even know if they'll do that. I think they might just have him not die. I think they might just. I don't know. I don't really know how you like. I'm thinking like they say, oh, he left and like he retired or something. But then like, why would he allow all this shit to continue to happen? Like that's not like what his character would do. So,
Right. I mean, he's the king. You don't really retire from being a king.
yeah, exactly. So it's not like he could just ride off into the sunset and have that just be it.
I do think that they're going to have his character die. I just don't think it'll be in any kind of tasteless way. Like, he'll either die being a hero, or they'll try and tie it into, like, how he passed in real life and be like, he suffered in silence, because that's what everybody's been saying about him the past couple of months, is that, like, he told almost nobody about that.
That would not be a bad idea. Because yeah, you can just kind of incorporate reality because the guy's like a real life superhero. So yeah, no, I could actually. That's not a bad idea. I never really thought about it like that, but and it would be better than I don't know doing the whole Princess Leia going down that route and doing that dumb shit with like.
I
CGI
don't want them to do that at all.
I don't think they will.
Yeah, and I think they learned their lesson, because so many people had a problem with that just on a moral level. But in addition to that, like, you could tell those scenes that they were pulling with her were from different movies, because some of the time when she was talking to characters who clearly filmed their scenes, years later for the new movie, it didn't feel natural. Like, they were trying to tie in the dialogue that she had to a different conversation, and it just didn't work.
Yeah, exactly. That it felt very forced, and it just didn't look great.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. It was one thing when they did it in Rogue One with Grand Moff Tarkin or whatever his name is. I think it was Rogue One. That didn't really bother me as much. I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool.
That just bothered me because it looked bad. Like, you could tell it wasn't his face.
Yeah, that was obviously CGI. They did, I think, a decent enough job, but it still wasn't great at all. I mean, he died so many years earlier that didn't really bother me. The Princess Leia thing I just thought was stupid. It was really dumb. Not in that movie. I thought that movie, oh, cool tie-in. But, like, to have her in a full-length movie, it's not like her role is, like, curtailed at all either. Like, she's very much in Episode 7 or Episode 8 and Episode 9. And just, I don't know. Especially when you had a perfect opportunity, too, to write her out. I know we're going off on a Star Wars rant here, but especially when you had that point in Episode 8 when she was, I hate this scene, when she flies down to outer space, and then she just got pulled back in. It's like, oh, no, she's not dead. She's still alive. Or she used the Force or some dumb shit. That annoyed me to no end. And I know I'm not the only one either.
Well, her using the Force didn't annoy me because it's supposed to be known that, like, Luke trained her in the ways of the Force after Episode 3.
Okay.
Or Episode 6, rather. But, just, like, they could have maybe put her in one or two small scenes in the beginning of that last movie, and then the rest of it could have focused on the other characters. Like, it felt like they just overreached, and it ended up making the movie just feel a little disjointed.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, the whole movie was a mess. But thankfully,
Plus, that movie was two movies, basically.
Yeah,
Episode 9 was, like, the first half of it was J.J. Abrams trying to make a better version of the last movie, and then the last half of it was what really should have been Episode 9. It was very strange. It had a very weird pace to it. Like, I enjoyed Episode 9, but it's definitely Not my favorite movie of the trilogy.
It's like if Thanos was the main bad guy in Avengers 1 and they killed him off. And then at the very beginning of like Infinity War, it's revealed that he was alive this entire time and that like he sent Ultron down to Earth or whatever. Like that dumb shit that they did in Episode 9. That whole opening scene was so confusing. It just came completely out of nowhere. But thankfully they didn't do that. MCU seems to know what they're doing. And I have faith that they know what they're doing moving forward as well. You mentioned it earlier on many different points, but just in general, do you have any bold predictions for Phase 4, Chris, as we move along here to the fourth phase of the MCU? I mean, obviously, Young Avengers. We mentioned that seems to be something they're setting up. You mentioned Tony as an AI form, so that would be one prediction as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to predict that Tony will end up in an AI form. I just kind of think it would be a good idea. I mean, the Spider-Man sequel, we already know that J.K. Simmons is coming back as J. Jonah Jameson because he was in the last movie and he's the one who reveals his identity. Mm-hmm. But I actually think that they're going to go in a different direction with his character this time, and I think at some point him and Spider-Man will work together. Like, he'll help Spider-Man clear his name or something. Because you can't just keep using that actor and have him be the same version of the character over and over. Like, yeah. He's voiced J. Jonah Jameson in so many cartoons and video games and all these other things, and he's always the same version of the character. They got to do something new with him. Yeah. So I think maybe the new direction would be that he's not necessarily always against Spider-Man. It's just that's the way it looked in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And that maybe he'll help him a little bit. As far as Thor Love and Thunder goes, I don't know if they have the guts to do the same storyline in the comics with Natalie Portman's character. Mm-hmm. Which is that, like, she's dying of cancer, and every time she turns into Thor, it, like, wipes the chemo out of her system and makes her sicker. To the point when, like, she basically knows at a certain point that she can only turn into Thor one or two more times before it'll kill her. All right. But she keeps doing it because, like, she's just a hero. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if they're going to go that route. I don't think they will. I think they're going to do something else and try and make it less depressing.
Yeah. I don't know if they would do that. I mean, especially with the whole cancer thing too with Chadwick Boseman. I don't know if they would do that card.
Yeah, exactly. That's another thing is that would almost be see, like, it wouldn't be I don't think it would be in bad taste though, because cancer is a part of everybody's life. Everybody has known somebody who's had cancer in their life. That's true, yeah. So I don't know if you can necessarily, plus there a few years will have passed since then. Mm-hmm. But I think it'll be something different. And plus, like, it seems like Valkyrie will also be a heavy focus of it. So I think it'll be a different story. But I think the Multiverse of Madness is going to be how they use or how they bring in mutants.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously coming as well. I would think maybe not even on the sooner side, just because they have so many movies coming up in the next couple of years. And that's not even including, I mean, you already mentioned Black Panther 2, but like Captain Marvel 2, Guardians 3, Spider-Man 3. You mentioned that movie earlier. There's so many sequels. Obviously, Thor Love and Thunder that we're not even accounting for, like the Blade movie they're coming out with, and Shang-Chi as well, and the movie that's coming out next year. God, what's it called? Not New Mutants.
Eternals.
The Eternals. Yep, that's the movie I'm thinking about. There's so many movies coming out that I don't know if they're going to be having the mutants anytime soon. But if they do, we also have a lot of shows too that, as you mentioned earlier, they could always tie it into that stuff too. WandaVision, Winter Soldier, and Falcon and Winter Soldier. They have the Hawkeye show. I don't really think that's going to be anything too important, but there's a lot of stuff to look forward to for Marvel fans. I know we're kind of in a rut right now, unfortunately. No movies since Far From Home well over a year ago. Thanks, COVID. But hopefully, with everything not dying down now, but it appears Black Widow is still on track to come out in early November. That very well may have changed by the time this podcast come out. But when it does come out, we both have a chance to watch it. Maybe we can get a female on as well. We discussed that earlier. We could definitely be breaking down that movie soon enough. So we got at least 2 more episodes to go in the MCU Rewatch Review series. Between that review of Black Widow, whether it be in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, depends on when the movie comes out and we all see it.
Yeah,
and then it could be literally next December. We have no idea right now. But we do have one more episode at least to look forward to next week, that being the Infinity Saga ranking of all 21, 22 movies, whatever it is, from Iron Man 1 to Far From Home. So we're going to be looking forward to that next week. And that's about it. And as we've said before as well, I probably won't include it in this playlist, podcast, or whatever. I might just call it something different. But we still have our many other Marvel movies to break down, from the terrible Howard the Duck movie to the Spider-Man movies to X-Men to Fantastic Four, the Blade movies you mentioned, and everything else in between. There's a lot of stuff to look forward to going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of the Fantastic Four, I think that they're going to be introduced before people think too. I don't think they're going to have an origin story. I think we're going to find out that the Fantastic Four has been out there this whole time. And they're a very spacefaring team. So I think, like, at some point, maybe Guardians 3, they're going to run across the Fantastic Four out in space doing their thing.
Okay. Well,
I just don't want them to do another origin story, because the last one was just so bad.
Yeah, no, it was terrible.
And the first 2 really weren't that good either, let's be honest.
No, they weren't that good, but that last one was just incredibly worse. It was just way, way, way too terrible. Do you think that they might have set up the Baxter Building as being in the background at Far From Home at the very end there that he kind of just goes through? Do you think the Baxter Building's already up or no?
I mean, they could just do what the other Fantastic Four movies did and claim a real building as the Baxter Building.
And it just no one knows about it.
Right, like Avengers Tower is kind of, it stands out in the skyline, but the Baxter Building was just sort of a big building, and there's a lot of those in New York, so they could just take one of the less famous ones and say, this is the Baxter Building, it's always been here.
Yeah, that would make sense. That would be a nice way to tie it in, saying that they've been here, but they haven't been doing jack shit until... you mentioned the space stuff.
Plus, Fury was shown in space at the end of Captain Marvel doing something. He's got a team preparing for something.
Well, I just thought he was on vacation. I know, obviously it wasn't a real screen, but it looked like he was just hanging out. But do you think there might be more to that, though?
Well, they showed that he was on, like, a space station.
Yeah, yeah. I thought he might have just, swapped places with the Skrulls, but, it probably could lead somewhere. I haven't heard any speculation about that.
Well, I think what he's preparing for is the Kree-Skrull War.
Oh, okay. And you think
which is a big storyline in the comics, and it takes place on Earth as part of the Secret Invasion, which is where a lot of heroes get replaced as Skrulls.
Mm-hmm. Do you think they might use that for a movie at some point?
If they do, it'll probably take place across a couple of movies and be set up along the way. You'll get an end credit sequence in the end of Shang-Chi, for example, and it shows somebody that we have known for years has actually been a Skrull for a little while. And then they'll do it again in another movie and again in another movie until it finally builds up to this thing of there's a problem, we need to figure out who all these fake people are. And then the Kree-Skrull War will happen at some point.
Okay. That's something to look forward to.
Which, that could be a Captain Marvel sequel, let's focus on the Kree-Skrull War for her sequel because she's so involved with it already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I didn't even really think about it as being a potential storyline idea, as something they can build off for a future movie. But that might not be for another 5 years. But there's so many options. There's so much stuff that we haven't even discussed that I may not even be aware of that they could use for a future movie. The Secret Wars, isn't that another thing too?
Yeah, that is the Skrull invasion. Oh. So Secret War is the Skrulls starting to slowly take out Marvel heroes, put them in like stasis chambers somewhere, and start living their lives instead. So for a little while, Captain America was actually just a Skrull impersonating Cap.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, okay. Yeah.
And they did it with a lot of heroes that people were surprised by.
Mm-hmm.
And then you find out like some of them had been replaced years earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was a crazy storyline. I don't know right now, like, oh, this person's been a Skrull the whole time. Like, I don't know who would work out good in that, but it would probably make the most sense to make it one of the more human characters. Because I don't know if the Skrulls can impersonate superpowers. I think it's just looks.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I know people were speculating, oh, could it have been Iron Man or could it have been Black Widow? I mean, when they die, they go back into being a Skrull. So obviously it couldn't have been them. You know, I feel like that'd be too cheap anyway.
But we know there's one Skrull out there from Captain Marvel who never was accounted for at the end.
That's true, because there were 3 of them. Oh, yeah, we discussed that in that review. Weren't there 3 of them, and then they found like 2 or something? Or that weren't killed or something like that.
Well, there was 4 that made it down in the beginning. One gets killed, and then the other one is like with Talos the whole time, and then the other one like gets in a fight with Carol but survives, and you never see them again.
Oh yeah, they just kind of run off.
Right, and true. So like that person, for all we know, has been Thunderbolt Ross this whole time. Like we have no clue. So I'm hoping they find something interesting to do with that Skrull in particular. And that they actually call back to Captain Marvel to say, like, yes, it's this guy. He went off and did this thing. Talos had no idea about it, and he's the one starting the secret invasion or something.
Thunderbolt Ross is in Black Widow, so that could be the swerve from the movie. We never know.
Well, I doubt they would make him a Skrull in that movie in particular. I think that's something they should save for later if they would even do it.
That wouldn't be a bad reveal at all, just because he isn't... You know, he's not a superhero. That's something they could feasibly do, you know?
Right, but he is in a position of power, so, like, It would make sense that they would want to take over his body in particular.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what they decide to do, though. I mean, they have a lot of storylines from the comics that they can draw on from decades and decades, so Secret Invasion might not even be on their radar for all we know.
Yeah, no, it may not be. I feel like we would have heard rumblings about it by now if it was, but it might be a while. We'll see. There's plenty of time remaining until they get to that point. So, at any rate, though, there's a lot of stuff to look forward to. A lot of movies we've already talked about, including everything in Phase 1, 2, and 3. We still have at least one more video to go, ranking all this stuff before we hopefully eventually review Black Widow as well. But Chris, this has been awesome. Thanks for taking the time as always to help me break down Phase 3 of the MCU. And I'll talk to you next week as we rank all the MCU movies, ideally from best to worst. And our rankings here today may vary drastically by the time that we do that one next week.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just looking forward to it.
Should be awesome. People can find you on the Twitter machine one more time at B_Doctor and me at WrestleRant. Chris, thanks again, dude. I'll talk to you then.
All right, take care.